From San Francisco, the city of the Golden Gate, the television networks and stations of the United States are bringing you the Japanese Peace Conference from the War Memorial Opera House here in San Francisco. These broadcasts from the Japanese Peace Conference mark the first transcontinental television transmission in the United States, sped by 107 microwave relay stations from one end of the country to the other. After last night's opening address by President Truman, the conference is now prepared to get down to the business at hand, the business which brought the delegates from 52 nations of the world here to San Francisco, the business of the consideration and endorsement of the Japanese Peace Treaty. Most of the delegates of the 52 nations have taken their places here in the great War Memorial Opera House as the first plenary session of the Japanese Conference is about to begin. This is Charles Collingwood. This morning, for its morning here in San Francisco, our instantaneous transcontinental television transmission needs no time zones, pays no attention to time zones. This morning, the delegates of 52 nations who have come here from the ends of the earth to consider the Japanese treaty are here in the War Memorial Opera House. There is an air of tension and expectancy which must come to you through the cameras and microphones of our television transmission here, an air of expectancy as the delegates take their places in preparation for the first plenary session. For over San Francisco and over this opera house this morning is the shadow of the Russian enigma, if indeed an enigma can cast a shadow. What everyone here in the conference wants to know is, what are the Russians going to do? What are they going to do to block, if that is their intention, or to impede at least the consideration and final endorsement of the Japanese treaty? Every delegation here has considered in its own mind and met with its members and other delegations to try to make their own estimate of what will be the Russian strategy. It's expected that the Russians will make their move, if indeed they make one, this morning when the time comes for the consideration of the rules. The rules of the conference are designed, and obviously designed, to limit discussion and make it impossible for any nation to conduct a filibuster on the Japanese treaty. When this conference gets underway in a few moments, it will be presided over by the temporary chairman, who is the Secretary of State, Mr. Dean Acheson of the United States. The television lights are here full blast on the conference and also on the stage. Mr. Acheson, preparing for his task as temporary chairman, is standing down in front of the stage trying on dark glasses so that the strong lights will not bother his eyes. Whether or not he's going to wear them is something else, but he's trying them on as aides hand them to him. Secretary Acheson, as I said, as the temporary chairman, will call the first plenary session to order and will proceed with the business, which is this, first of all, as always in a conference like this, the organization of the meeting. And the first thing that Secretary Acheson and the members of the conference will have to do is to adopt the rules. Now, these rules, which have been circulated to all delegations by the British and American delegations who are the sponsors of the conference, these rules call for no more than 1 hour of speeches by each delegation. However, until the rules are adopted, theoretically, delegates can speak as long as they want on the question of the rules. The conference apparently is about to get underway. The photographers who have been on the floor taking pictures of the delegates are now being cleared by officials of the conference. They're taking their last shots because while the meeting is going on, there will be no photographers on the floor. Instead, they will be photographing from the boxes where indeed most of our television cameras are. It's expected that the first test of the Russian ability to impede this conference will take place on the consideration of the rules, which is the first order of business this morning. When and if the rules are adopted today, then the conference will go forward with the election of its permanent chairman, who is suspected by one and all to be Ambassador Percy Spender, the ambassador to the United States from Australia. This is in the nature of what you would call an open secret, that Mr. Spender, Ambassador Spender, will be the first chairman. When I was in his apartment yesterday talking to him about other matters, there was a copy of Robert's Rules of Order lying on his desk, which is a good indication that he's preparing himself for what may be difficult moments in store for him as this conference gets underway with the participation of the Russian delegation. And now, down in the lobby, where the delegates, some of them are still coming in, is Bryson Rash. Bryson Rash is speaking with some of the delegates who come in, including Sir Kenneth Younger and other representatives of the British delegation who are there. Here inside, the conference is still in that state of preliminary turmoil as people take their seats, meet old friends, as the photographers, still, in spite of the admonitions to leave the hall, are taking their last pictures, as the delegates who are to make speeches go over the papers before them, as those who are concerned with strategy, who will rise to challenge perhaps the Russian interpretation of the rules, see to it that their strategy is in order as agreed upon by the delegations and by the friendly delegations. There's one thing about this conference and what will happen to it as it gets underway, and that is this, that no matter how long it takes or how strong will be the Russian efforts to impede it, a safe majority of the 52 nations here has already been lined up to sign the Japanese treaty. There is, as I have said, an air of expectancy because it's quite possible that there will be high drama this morning as a major test of international relations between the Western world and the world which is dominated by Soviet Russia gets underway here in the War Memorial Opera House at San Francisco this morning. As I've told you, all we know about what is likely to happen this morning is that the conference will be organized, and the first part of the organization of the conference, of any meeting for that matter, is the adoption of the rules. And a special set of rules has been adopted in order to speed the work of the conference. That is, it has not been adopted, it's been drawn up. Now it's expected that the Russians will object to these rules because they constitute, in effect, a limitation of debate. And the Russians, at conferences like this one, which they wish to obstruct, are usually apt to do it by speaking for hours and hours on end, and that's what the conference wants to stop. However, the Russians will have a chance to make their points before the rules are adopted, and while theoretically the conference is debating whether or not to adopt the rules which have already been circulated by the sponsoring delegations, the United States and Great Britain. The Russians have arrived, and they maintain, as always, that enigmatic silence. It would take a mind reader, because no reader of facial expressions can deduce anything from that which characterizes the immobile visage of Mr. Andrei Gromyko, the chief of the Russian delegation, who came here with a party of about 40, and who, instead of staying here in San Francisco, in town, in the hotels, like all the rest of the delegations, took a large, commodious, and spectacularly capitalistic mansion outside of San Francisco. And now, Mr. Dean Acheson, the chairman, is rapping on his gavel, calling the conference to order.
The first plenary session of the Conference for the Conclusion and Signature of the Peace Treaty with Japan is convened. The first order of business is the organization of the conference to include the adoption of rules of procedure and the election of officers. Before I recognize any delegate, I wish to make a few observations as to the character of this conference. The delegations of the governments here represented have come in response to an invitation to meet for conclusion and signature of the Treaty of Peace with Japan, with its attendant declarations on the terms of the August 13, 1951 text, which in the invitation was described as a final text. This is the text which emerged from 11 months of negotiation. It is the text which the delegation of Japan, the delegations of the co-sponsors of the text, the United Kingdom and the United States, and the delegations of most of the other allied nations have come here for the purpose of signing. The fact that the signing of the Treaty of Peace with Japan is preceded by a conference is due to the desire expressed by a number of allied powers that they should have an opportunity prior to the actual signing to make public and official statements regarding the treaty and regarding their aspirations for peace, which the treaty is designed to realize. The fact that the treaty had been negotiated by diplomatic rather than by conference methods made it seem desirable to provide an opportunity to make such an historic record prior to the ceremony of signing. That is the purpose of this conference. The purpose of the conference was clearly set out in the invitation and in the accompanying oral explanations which were given in transmitting the invitation. In addition, where circumstances seemed to make it appropriate, diplomatic reminders were given in order to avoid the possibility of future misunderstanding. Therefore, while serving as your temporary presiding officer, I shall conduct these proceedings in such a way as to realize the purpose for which the conference was called. That is, for the conclusion and signature of the Treaty of Peace with Japan on the terms of the text before us. I recognize the delegate from New Zealand.
Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, a necessary preliminary to the work which lies before us is, of course, the adoption of the rules of procedure under which this conference is to be operated. Proposals to this end have been drafted by the delegations of the United States and the United Kingdom and have been circulated to all other delegations as conference document number 9. I submit that these proposals are adequate and appropriate to the particular character of this meeting, and I formally move their adoption.
Is the vote? The delegate of Cuba.
This is Walter Cronjade speaking to you from the CBS box. The representative from Cuba is just about to make a nomination. We believe we'll turn it back to him.
First movement in this conference to arrive to our object, to conclude and sign a treaty with Japan, ought to be the discussion and approval of the rule of procedures of the conference. Thanks.
It has been moved and seconded that the rules of procedure proposed jointly by the governments of the United States and the United Kingdom be adopted. Is there any discussion? Delegate of the Soviet Union.
Mr. President, the Soviet delegation wishes to make some remarks and to ask a question which must be decided before the rules of procedure are adopted and before such a decision of the conference is made. The Soviet delegation would wish to see invited to the conference the government of the Chinese People's Republic. We must face the fact which is that of the Chinese Republic, which is the representative of the Chinese people, and which is particularly interested in the preparation of the peace with Japan and in the establishment of peace in the Far East. During many years, these people have fought against the aggression by Japanese militarism, and no one has fought more against Japan than they have, and they are those who have been the main victims of Japanese aggression. The people of China have fought for many years a single-handed fight against Japanese militarism. And in addition, it is very well known that China is one of the principal parties to international agreements concluded by the Allied powers during the Second World War, pertaining to question concerning conducting the war and the post-war settlement for Japan. Among such agreements are the United Nations Declaration of January 1st, 1942, the Cairo Declaration of 1943, the Potsdam Declaration of July 26, the Potsdam Agreement of August 2nd, 1945, and other agreements. Finally, China, together with the United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union, on September 2nd, 1945, signed the Act of Capitulation of Japan. All this goes to prove that the Chinese People's Republic has an indisputable right to take part in the peace settlement for Japan, in the preparation and signing of a peace treaty for Japan, and that without its participation, neither a consideration nor, moreover, the conclusion of a peace treaty with Japan can take place. The government of the Chinese People's Republic, in its statement of May 22nd and of August 15, 1951, has confirmed its lawful rights and extreme interest in the preparation and conclusion of a peace treaty with Japan, which cannot be said by all the other governments here. The Soviet government, in its remarks of May 7th and in its note to the government of the United States of June 10th, 1951, regarding the American draft peace treaty with Japan, stated that it was inadmissible and unlawful to ban the government of the Chinese People's Republic from the preparation and the conclusion of peace treaty with Japan. The government of the USSR still holds to this position and considers that without the participation of the Chinese People's Republic, it is impossible to establish a durable peace in the Far East. In connection with the above said, the Soviet delegation proposes to send the Central People's Government of the Chinese People's Republic an invitation to send its delegation to the present conference. Mr. Chairman, in the very beginning, I have mentioned that this question, the question of inviting the People's Republic of China, should be decided first in the very firm opinion of the Soviet delegation, since this very question is the basic question for the conference. If all the members, or those present at the conference, it is believed that all those who should participate from the very beginning in order to decide of all questions before the conference, as well the question of the rules of procedure, the question of the election of the permanent president, and any other question. And that is why I am asking the conference to take a decision on this question now.
And thus, the Russian delegate, Mr. Gromyko, has again brought up the question of Chinese representation at a United Nations conference.
Delegate of the Soviet
Mr.
Union
Acheson
has proposed that this conference, at this point in its proceedings, should consider the question of inviting the representatives of the Chinese People's Republic to attend this conference. The matter before the conference at this moment is the adoption of the rules. The rules have been moved and seconded, and the debate is upon the adoption of the rules. I therefore rule that the proposal of the delegate of the Soviet Union to discuss another matter at this time is out of order. Is there further discussion?
You see Mr. Gromyko there. He made a brief comment to his seatmate on Mr. Acheson's ruling, which in effect overruled him completely on the matter of the Chinese question at this time.
I must ask the audience, please, to refrain from expressions of approval or disapproval on the conduct of the proceedings here. Is there further discussion of the matter of adopting the rules? The delegate of Czechoslovakia.
This gives the communist delegations their second opportunity now. This question rules procedure, and perhaps another problem will be brought before the conference.
I would like to confine myself only to seconding the motion of the delegate of the USSR. I think it is absolutely essential that this decision be taken before we discuss or adopt our rules of procedure, because only a conference in a correct composition can take a decision on its order of business. I ask, therefore, to discuss first the motion of the USSR.
The Czechoslovakian delegate is Dr.
proposal
Gertude
of the
Sekaninova, the only woman delegate
order.
to this session here.
There has been no appeal from the ruling of the chair. Therefore, I must deny the request of the delegate of Czechoslovakia to discuss that motion, that proposal of the USSR further at this point. The meeting of the conference is open for further discussion of the adoption of the rules.
Mr. Gromyko is interrupting again.
The representative of the USSR.
Господин председатель,
Mr. President,
правила процедуры еще не
rules of procedure have not been adopted yet,
Поэтому,
and for that reason, as long as this is not done, you cannot say that because the Soviet proposal is not agreeable to you regarding the discussion in the beginning, the invitation to the People's Republic of China, that question should not be discussed. The Soviet delegation is not in agreement with your ruling and with your decision on that question. We challenge this ruling, says the delegate in English. We consider, and that is something which I have mentioned, that the question of the invitation of the government of the People's Republic of China is a question concerning the composition of the conference. And it is quite certain that this question should be discussed of all. I hope you'll remember the conference in San Francisco in 1945. I believe that the representatives of the American delegation have raised the question of the participation in this conference. This was the very first question which was raised. And this question is considered as being the first question to be discussed. The question of the participation in conference should be always discussed before the rules of procedure are being discussed. Moreover, and I just mention, in his discussion, the President have not shown how this question of the invitation should be discussed. I understand very well that if the President have made such a decision, such a statement, then the question raised by the Soviet delegation would be discussed after the adoption of the rules of procedure. That there will be some logic in this, but we consider that present decision entirely incorrect, because in the discussion of rules of procedure, all the governments having the right to participate should be able to discuss. And that would be understandable. But this was not even said. For as much as the Soviet delegation and some other delegations are not in agreement with the ruling of the President, the conference, and only the conference, is able to decide the question raised by the Soviet delegation. Because this, it's quite clear that only the conference is empowered to reach an answer to this question. I have a high regard for the President and for the rights of the President. But his rights are not absolute. The Soviet delegation asks the conference to discuss the question which has been raised by the Soviet delegation and to take a decision thereon.
The Soviet delegate has appealed from the decision of the chair, and in accordance with proper parliamentary procedure, he has the right to have a vote of the conference upon the correctness of the ruling of the chair. The chair has ruled that the business before the conference at the present time is the motion to adopt the rules, and that while that motion is pending, the chair will not permit discussion of other matters. I shall ask for a vote of the conference as to whether the conference wishes to sustain the chair. The vote will be taken by a raising of hands. I shall ask the chief delegate or chairman of each delegation to vote for his delegation, and each delegation will have one vote. After you have raised your hands, will you please keep your hands raised until the Secretary General. For what purpose?
Я вынужден протестовать против вашего рулинга.
I wish to protest against this ruling.
Формально и официально перед конференцией протестовать против этого рулинга.
I have opposing this ruling formally and officially.
Я воздерживался от этого.
So far I have refrained from doing it, but I repeat what I have said, that we are opposing this ruling since we consider the rights of the President as being those of a provisional President. If any, this or this other delegation opposes his ruling, should let the conference decide on this question, since the conference alone is empowered to reach it, to decide the question. And certain speeches on this subject must be heard. I am asking you, Mr. President, if we are going to take into account the elementary rules, elementary standards, and taking into account the rights of the other delegations, the more so that these rights are absolute and cannot be challenged. I have said already that a decision has been taken that at the beginning we should make a decision, adopt the rules of procedure, and that after this should be discussed the question raised by the Soviet delegation. I would have thought that if such has been the decision of the President, he would announce it. But however, this has not been announced. And this is a question which will be raised by the Soviet delegation, and the Soviet delegation will raise this question until the conference itself, and only the conference, will take a decision regarding that question. I am not speaking now of the fact that the very situation is very strange. We have a room here.
Стоит делегат Польши, глава
We
Польшей.
have in front of us the delegate of
Глава польской
Poland,
делегации Польской Республики.
the head